Order. Order, order. Okay, committee members will be beginning shortly. It's 10 minutes past the concluding of the vote, so the clerk has advised me. Everybody's appearing in the room. We do have a quorum, so I will call the meeting to order, and I want to welcome and recognize Monsieur Gaudin, who will be replacing Mr. Aitchison for today's meeting. Okay, thanks. I call the meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 64 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Human Resources, Skills, Social Development, and the Status of Persons with Disabilities. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. Today, all the committee members are appearing in person in the room. So I would like to advise you to ensure an orderly meeting. Before speaking, wait until I recognize you by name. There's nobody appearing virtually. You can choose to speak in the official language of your choice by using the headset in the room. If there's an issue with translation, please let me know. I'll suspend while it's being corrected. As well, I would just want to remind members and those witnesses that may be speaking to speak slowly to give the interpreters the opportunity to translate. As well, those appearing virtually or in the room, screenshots of today's meeting are not allowed. And again, if there's any technical issues that come up during the meeting, please get my attention. We'll suspend while they're being corrected. Pursuant Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Friday, February the 3rd, 2023, the committee will continue its study of Bill C-35, an act respecting early learning and childcare in Canada. Today we are proceeding to clause-by-clause consideration. I would like to provide members of the committee with some instructions and a few comments on how the committee will proceed with the clause-by-clause consideration of Bill C-35. As the name indicates, this is an examination of all the clauses in the order in which they appear in the bill. I will call each clause successively, and each clause is subject to debate and a vote. If there are amendments to the clause in question, I will recognize the member proposing the amendment, who may explain it. The amendment will then be open for debate. When no further member wishes to intervene, the amendment will be voted on. Amendments will be considered in the order in which they appear in the bill or in the package each member received from the clerk. Members should note that amendments must be submitted in writing to the clerk of the committee. As the chair, I will go slowly to allow all members to follow the proceedings properly. And if at any time you are unsure, please, you can always call for a suspension while you get a chance to establish where we're at. Amendments have been given an alphanumeric number in the top right corner to indicate which party submitted them. There is no need for a seconder to move an amendment. Once moved, you will need unanimous consent to withdraw it. During debate on an amendment, members are permitted to move sub-amendments. These sub-amendments must be submitted in writing. They do not require the approval of the mover of the amendment. Only one sub-amendment may be considered at a time, and that sub-amendment cannot be amended. When a sub-amendment is moved to an amendment, it is voted on first. Then another sub-amendment may be moved, or the committee may consider the main amendment and vote on it. Once every clause has been voted on, the committee will vote on the title and the bill itself, and an order to reprint the bill may be required if amendments are adopted so that the House has a proper copy for use at report stage. Finally, the committee will have to order the chair to report the bill to the House. The report contains only the text of any adopted amendments as well as an indication of any deleted clauses. I would like to welcome representatives from the department who are available to answer technical questions related to the bill. Michelle Lattimore, Director General of Federal Secretariat on Early Learning and Child Care. Welcome. Sherry Redden, Director General, Indigenous Early Learning and Child Care. Jill Henry, Director of Policy, Indigenous Early Learning. Kelly Nares, Director, Federal Secretariat of Early Learning. Christine Paradis, Director of Federal Secretariat on Early Learning and Child Care. Again, all welcome to the committee. We will now proceed with clause-by-clause consideration of Bill C-35, which you have before you. I will begin with Clause 2. My understanding there's no amendments under Clause 2. Shall Clause 2 carry? Clause 2 is carried. Clause 3. Shall Clause 3 carry? See consensus. Clause 3 carried. Shall Clause 4 carry? See consensus. Clause 4 carried. Clause 5. I understand there's an amendment. Monsieur Gaudin.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I am here today to express the importance that we, the Conservative Party of Canada, give to the two official languages, and I think it's important that it's reflected in all laws. We have studied this bill, and we will surely debate on this bill in the House of Commons. It's nothing new because it has been published, so in the future bills, we have to underscore the importance of the two official languages. This is why I am submitting Amendment CPC 0.1, and I'm going to read it now to you. That Bill C-35 be amended on page 3 as follows. Childcare in both languages Canada-wide be substituted in line 5 with the province, indigenous people, and communities in minorities. C. Substitute with line 23 as follows. By replacing in the French version of line 24 in page 3 with the following. Nu avec les provinces, les peuples autochtones et les communautés de langue officielle en situation minoritaire afin. Well, Mr. Chair, when we had discussed about official languages, many organizations talked about the importance of ensuring that our young people have access to education in French in minority communities, making sure that in the future our bilingual Canada, and I underline the term bilingual in English and in French, because we have a Governor General who is bilingual but who doesn't speak French. But in the law, we have to make sure that our country, Canada, which is proud of being a bilingual country, that it be reflected in all of the laws. This is the purpose of the amendment that I am submitting, Mr. Chairman. I am willing to answer any questions. Thank you.
Excuse Madame. You've all heard the amendment moved by Mr. Gaudin. Discussion? Madame Beyroube.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Concerning CPC/1, I think we need to ensure that we modify communauté de langue officielle en situation minoritaire with communauté en situation minoritaire. So, ensuring that in the French version, we just talk about the community. In Canada, the only official language that is in a minority situation is French. We see a high access of Anglophone child care services in Francophone Canada. So it's difficult for French-speaking Canadians outside of Quebec to find services in their languages. This is why it's important to give services for child care and early learning in Francophone communities outside of Quebec. We know that Quebec is an exemplary service for child care. there is work-family balance, there is access for women who want to go back to work. There are learning programs that are very important at the level of childcare services.
Clear. So you're moving an amendment to, you're moving a sub-amendment to the amendment.
Sous-amendement.
Wait, could you provide that in written form to the clerk? Do we have it, or to the clerk does not know. The legislative clerk. No, it's the legislative clerk. Thank you, Madame Beyroubet. Discussion on the sub-amendment of Madame Beyroubet. Monsieur Gaudin on the sub-amendment.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I think my colleague from Bloc Québécois is right when she's considering the province of Quebec, but considering that we are a country, Canada, and we have a comprehensive vision for the entire country, and we have to protect both official languages. So when we're looking at Quebec alone, it might be problematic, I understand, but we have to look at it as a whole. The country, Canada, is a bilingual country, English and French, so we have to protect the two official languages. In minority situation, we don't have to minimize one language over another. It's just we have to protect both languages. That's our philosophy.
The legislative clerk has a quick question. Madame Beyroubet. Madame Clerk.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Juste pour préciser.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify something on point C, line 28 and 29. Is that where the amendment would be? Because I see here you're talking about replacing lines 28 and 29, training long-term funding.
Ce que j'ai ici, c'est seulement pour.
Because the amendment I have before me only considers point C, but do you want an amendment under point A, B, and C? Thank you.
Madame Beyroubet.
Moi, je propose un sous-amendement.
I am proposing a sub-amendment.
Ben oui, c'est ça, tu veux faire. C'est bon.
Go ahead.
Oui, juste si vous aviez.
If you have a written version under A, because under B we can see where we're talking about Francophone communities, but I just need clear language for paragraph A, where we talk about childcare system, including in both official languages. So where do you intend to insert Francophone in that sentence? You can delete the sub-amendment for point A.
Excuse Madame Beyroubet. I'll suspend for a moment while we get this clear.
On le concerne comme
Do
il
you
est
want to consult?
présentement.
Yeah. Are we clear now? To clarify with the clerk exactly, you clear, legislative clerk, on the
Donc
sub-amendment?
le point A demeure inchangé.
So paragraph A stays unchanged. Point B, we will indicate Francophone communities in minority situations, and in C, Francophone communities.
Madame Beyroubet, Monsieur Gaudin.
En fait, Monsieur le Président,
Well, Mr. Chairman, I understand that we are at the very beginning and we are just coming out of studying each section of a bill. So when we are proposing an amendment, we don't need to amend a sub-amendment. So I think we should crave the indulgence of the committee. So may we simply have the sub-amendment proposed by Bloc Québécois, but maybe in the future we should not think about amending a sub-amendment of an amendment.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I think that Ms. Berube wanted simply to amend, or she simply amended her sub-amendment for clarification purposes.
Any further discussion on the sub-amendment of Mr. Godin?
En fait, Monsieur le Président, je voudrais
Mr. Chairman, I simply want to clearly know exactly what is the sub-amendment so that we can arrive at a decision, because what we received is not in line with what we're talking about right now. So, Mr. Chair, if I may clarify, what I see here in writing on the sub-amendment is under C, replacing lines 28 and 29 on page 3. So instead of saying maintaining long-term funding for the province's indigenous and official language minority, we would talk instead of official language minority communities, we'll talk about francophone minorities, and that will be a similar replacement under B above, where we are talking about provinces, indigenous peoples, and communities. We will talk about francophone communities there.
So are all committee members understand the sub-amendment that's been circulated and proposed by Madame Berube? I believe I have Ms. Gray and then Madame Gazan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The sub-amendment reads, it's talking about Clause 11, but I believe we're on Clause 5, are we not? So the the sub-amendment, isn't matching what we're referencing here, and what our amendment is with CPC 0.1. So it's not aligning, and I'm very confused what the discussion is. Thank you.
Why I requested a brief suspension while we clarify exactly what. Yeah. Yeah. We'll suspend for a couple of moments while we get this corrected. You're correct, Madame Gray. Suspend for a couple of minutes. Okay, we'll resume. Madame Beyroube, we need a clarification on your sub-amendment. You're doing it?
Oui.
Okay.
Précision. Oui. Un instant, s'il vous plaît.
One moment, please.
Committee members, I've been advised by the clerk that we need to suspend for at least 4 more minutes while the sub-amendment is being redrafted. I would urge all members of the committee, when you're preparing amendments or sub-amendments, to have them prepared accurately so they're in on time. We have adequate time to prepare for this meeting. So we'll suspend for 4 more minutes while it is being drafted correctly. Spend. It's my understanding that all members should have a copy of the, no?
It's in the process of being distributed.
You will be getting it shortly. You'll have a copy of the sub-amendment of Madame Beyroube. As soon as we have it, if there's no further discussion on it, then we will go to a vote on. Everybody have it? Madame Beyroube's sub-amendment is to the amendment of Mr. Gaudin on Clause 5. Madame Gazan?
I just have the old one. Oh, it's in my email. Sorry. I'm not sure handing it out. I apologize.
Focus committee members. So I just want to give everybody the opportunity to see the sub-amendment that is being proposed by Madame Beyroube. Madame Gazan? Oui? Yeah, okay. Any discussion on the sub-amendment of Madame Beyroube? See no discussion. Monsieur Gaudin, on the sub-amendment?
En fait, Monsieur,
Well, Chair, I just want to repeat what I said earlier. I think we need to consider both official languages. I understand why Bloc Québécois will look at the province of Quebec, but given that we are members of the Parliament of Canada, we have to consider the two official languages, and it's important to distinguish that. Thank you.
Monsieur Gaudin, seeing no other discussion, I'll ask the clerk to call a recorded vote on the sub-amendment of Madame Beyroube. Mr. Clerk? Everybody clear what they're voting on? Sub-amendment, you have it?
Ms. Sachs?
Contre.
Mr. Collins? No. Mr. Coteau? Opposed. Mr. Van Bynen? Opposed. Mr. Long?
No.
Ms. Gray?
No?
Ms. Falk? No. Ms. Ferrari?
No.
Mr. Godin? Monsieur Godin, pardon?
non.
Madame Beyroube? And Ms. Gazan?
No.
Yes pour 1, nays contre 10.
The sub-amendment is defeated. We'll move to the amendment of Mr. Gaudin. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Ms. Sachs?
Just to clarify, we're now voting on the original amendment submitted by Monsieur Gaudin?
Wait,
Okay, thank you.
everybody's clear. The amendment of Mr. Gaudin. Mr. Gaudin?
En fait, considérant le fait que ça fait longtemps.
Well, considering that I made this submission a long time ago, I want us to understand the purpose. It is to make sure that official languages are considered in bills covering child care. I think that young children need to have access to the official languages in those minority communities, and we have to make sure that we protect access to these languages, and I think it's important that it is highlighted and it shows clearly in every single bill, because that is the it is enshrined in Law C-13. This is why I think we should make sure that official languages are always considered in the future. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Gaudin. Seeing no further discussion, Mr. Clerk, call for a recorded vote on the amendment of Mr. Gaudin on Clause 5. We're voting on the amendment of Mr. Godin on Clause 5.
Madame Sachs,
Contre.
Mr. Collins, Mr. Coteau, Mr. Van Bynen, Mr. Long,
No.
Ms. Gray,
Yes?
Ms. Falk, Ms. Ferrari,
Yes.
Mr. Godin,
En faveur.
Madame Bérubé, and Ms. Guzan.
No.
Yeas pour 5, nays contre 6.
The amendment of Mr. Godin is defeated. I'll now, Clause 5, carried without amendment. Yes, we call a vote on Clause 5. Did we? We didn't, yeah, because it was amended. Yeah.
There was no amendment to clause 5, but we still need to.
On Clause 5. Clause 5 without amendment.
Ms. Sachs,
En faveur.
Mr. Collins, Mr. Coteau, Mr. Van Bynen, Mr. Long,
Yes.
Ms. Gray,
It's just we don't necessarily need a vote on the clause itself, but we do need to vote on the clause itself.
Why, there was consent, okay.
Mr. Chair, there were some side conversations, and I know with the clerk, can we have a moment, or I know that we're mid-vote, I don't know if that's,
We're just voting on the clause.
we're just voting on the clause itself, we just need some clarification.
We're
There was
voting
some-
on Clause 5 without amendment, as I instructed. Clause 5 without amendment. The amendments were defeated. So we're voting, so again, I'll ask the clerk to review. We'll start again.
You want me to start
Yeah, please. Or, well, unless we have it recorded, we're clear. Continue on where we're at. It's Clause 5 without amendment. The amendments were defeated.
Yeah, you.
Okay? Good.
Okay.
Okay.
Ms. Gray,
Yes?
Ms. Falk, Ms. Ferrari,
Yes.
Monsieur Godin,
Oui.
Madame Bérubé, and Ms. Guzan.
Yes.
Yeas pour 11.
Clause 5 carried without amendment. Clause 6.
It's when so just gonna-
Madame Gazan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I want to amend Clause 6 to add Clause 6 by amending, replacing lines 29 and 30 on page 4 with the following. Programs and services that are culturally appropriate, that are led by Indigenous peoples, and that respect the right of Indigenous peoples to free, prior, and informed consent in matters relating to children. And can I speak to my amendment? Thank you. So in the last session, we passed a bill C-15, which, according to Article 5 of the bill, it says the Government of Canada must, in consultation and cooperation with Indigenous peoples, take all measures necessary to ensure that the laws of Canada are consistent with the Declaration. This is the first occasion on which we can actually uphold the intent of that bill, the legal obligations of that bill. And I just want to remind everybody here that, you know, it's my understanding that all members of Parliament have committed to reconciliation in this country. And at the very core of reconciliation is to give us back our rights of our children. That means that all matters respecting our children, that Indigenous people should have their free, prior, and informed consent upheld. And unfortunately, as we meet here today to discuss this bill, in real time, that is not happening. I'll give you a couple of examples. At this moment in time, Indigenous women continue to experience forced sterilization in 2023. That's an attack on our rights as mothers of our children. A second example is birth alerts, reports of birth alerts that still occur in this country in real time. And I don't know any parent in this country where I would ever argue that any parent has the free, prior, and informed consent over matters impacting their children. Unfortunately, for Indigenous peoples in Canada, particularly mothers, that continues not to happen. And so I urge members of this committee, in an act of reconciliation, if we are to move forward in this country, then we must first recognize the need to give Indigenous people our children back. And I've had many good discussions with many of you around the room about the value of this bill, of this amendment, in terms of a real act of reconciliation in this country. I feel that we're ready for that. I certainly wouldn't debate any parental right to free, prior, and informed consent. Unfortunately, that's still not the case for Indigenous people in this country. And I am looking forward to this moment to work together to reconcile in this country in a real way. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Ms. Gazan, a discussion on the amendment of Ms. Gazan. I had Ms. Sachs and then Mr. Unless a point of order or technical.
No, I just had a question to the mover of the amendment, so you can put it on the
Okay,
regular
Ms.
list.
Sachs has the floor, and then we'll go to you, Mr. Coteau. Ms. Sachs?
Thank you, Chair, and through you, Chair, I'd like to acknowledge to my colleague from the NDP that I value her insights tremendously. She is a fierce fighter for Indigenous rights in this country, and she has moved me to tears many times in the chamber over her commitment to righting the wrongs that we are on in the history of this country, and holding us to account, all of us who work here, to account as we move through the path of reconciliation. But Mr. Chair, I just want to make sure that we're clear on what we're doing here today, and what this is a part of in the bigger picture of children in this country and Indigenous children. This is a chamber that committed to UNDRIP and committed to that process in our negotiations and ongoing discussions, the framework of UNDRIP and its implementation with our Indigenous leadership in this country. And talks continue, and they're not always easy. There are challenges, there are bumps in the road, but this is a government and many members here who have committed to that process, as hard as it may be. And I've been engaged in processes similar in other parts of the world, and I know how painful they are. And the intergenerational trauma and setting up a system that's built on trust. And we know that fundamentally that is what we're hoping for in righting the wrongs that have been done for many Indigenous children in this country over generations. But Mr. Chair, the process of UNDRIP and its implementation framework is something that is an ongoing process. We're still in that process with Indigenous leadership to create the legal framework of which FPIC is a part of. And I would hate to see that as we are servants of the Crown here, and we all represent servants of the Crown here, that we don't put the cart before the horse in determining what the legal framework of FPIC is or UNDRIP before those negotiations are completed. I would never want a situation where legislation had been put forward and then passed in the chamber that bypassed that very important dialogue that is happening right now to ensure that Indigenous-led process, whether it is in education, whether it is in IELCC, whether it's in all aspects of implementing Indigenous rights and future legislation in this country, I would never want a situation where the people sitting at that table have usurped that right or interceded on those negotiations in any way. That is my reservation. That doesn't take us away from the principle and the important value that we have to place in educating our children and recognizing that Indigenous communities need to be in the driver's seat of educating their children. That is a key part of reconciliation. That's why I asked my minister for the Indigenous early learning file, understanding that it is a key component of reconciliation. But we're here today to talk about the nationwide system and the agreements that are in place. And I hope that colleagues understand that I want to make sure that we are moving through these two parallel processes in the right way that honors the negotiations that are going on with Indigenous leadership.
Thank you, Ms. Sachs. Mr. Coteau, you...
Thank you so much. Well, first, I'd just like to ask the mover of the amendment just to explain a little bit more about informed consent, and then I'd like to ask the officials to kind of give your opinion and bring some clarity to the issue, if that's okay.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much for that question. And just so you know, there is an instrument which is used to determine FPIC. It's the UN expert mechanism, in fact. What free, prior, and informed consent means: free of coercion, prior to any decision being made, knowing what you're making a decision about, and unless you have those three things, you don't have consent. I know that we're talking about consultation processes with Indigenous people. I don't know any parent in this country that would oppose having their free, prior, and informed consent about matters impacting their children. In fact, I would like you to find me one Indigenous person, never, let alone, political organization, political leadership that would say, no, we don't want to have rights. We don't want to have our self-determination respected over matters impacting our children. I don't think any parent, in fact, would fight against their self-determination to make decisions about their own children. That is simply what my amendment is proposing. And as a country, we have also signed on to international law. And part of that international law is the UN expert mechanism, as well as free, prior, and informed consent. This already informs part of our law. I'm not proposing something outside of Canadian law. And it's affirmed once again through Bill C-15. But in the spirit of reconciliation, in the spirit of healing in this country, we need to see this in a bill. I'm talking as an Indigenous person and legal framework. We need to know that Canada understands in 2023 that Indigenous people, even though we have Canadian Human Rights Tribunal battles going on still in the courts, forced sterilization and birth alerts, no access to school, that at the very least, in the spirit of reconciliation, in spite of all the constant human rights violations, that we have free, prior, and informed consent, free of coercion, prior to any decisions being made about our kids, and informed, knowing what the decision is before any decision is made. That's precisely what this amendment is for. Thank you.
Gazan, officials can speak to the technical aspects of the bill, but cannot provide an opinion.
Perhaps just a few things to highlight. First, I'd like to highlight that Bill C-35 does include a strong commitment in Clause 5F to contribute to the implementation of UNDRIP. I'd also like to underscore that the Indigenous-specific references in the bill are grounded in work that was co-developed with Indigenous peoples, including the co-developed Indigenous Early Learning and Childcare Framework, and that work continues through the co-development process that's being led through the Department of Justice with Indigenous governments to give meaning to the United Nations Declaration and its application in Canada, and including consideration of ACPIC in that context. So from a policy perspective, I would underscore the need to abide by that practice, to not use this legislation to get out ahead of it. And I'd also like to underscore that the bill was drafted with the intention of being flexible, to be able to catch up with that eventual outcome. The last thing I would like to note from a policy perspective is any decision to include FPIC at this time in the clause would essentially be baseless. As a federal official, I have no idea how we would implement that. What measures would apply or what test would apply to ensure that the government was adhering to FPIC obligations.
Ms. Redden, Ms. Gazan, on your amendment.
Yes, thank you so much, Chair. The government made a commitment in the last session. We voted on it in the House. It certainly passed to uphold the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. Part of that is FPIC. That is part of the declaration in itself. I'm just calling the government on actually upholding what they promised to do in terms of now a legal obligation, because it's now passed into law. I also want to point to Article 3 of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Indigenous peoples have the right to self-determination. By virtue of their right, they freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. Central to self-determination, as affirmed in the framework, is free, prior, and informed consent. That is self-determination. So if the argument is, that there's a commitment to uphold the UN declaration, then there shouldn't be any issue with this amendment, because in fact it supports certainly that position of the folks that have joined us here today. Sherry Redden, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and I want to thank officials for the clarification and thank my colleague. Mr. Chair, I don't think anyone in this room disagrees with the importance of this. I think every single one of us has made that commitment over time of simply sitting in the House and learning more and more in the work that we do of understanding how important this path is. But I would just like to update committee members a little bit that the Department of Justice is currently working with Indigenous leadership on this, on an action plan for UNDRIP, and that my concern that I wish to share is that I would hate to see this as a unilateral imposition on the work that's being done in a co-developed manner. I want to be able to respect the Indigenous leadership that is at the table, working with the Department of Justice on the commitment that was made by legislators to commit to UNDRIP. With that commitment comes a work process for implementation. I wouldn't disagree with my colleague that it's slow, that there are frustrations, that it's hard. This is hard work to do. And the clock has run out for many families, for many communities. That being said, I would hate to see a situation where we are taking a unilateral move against that very important work. I do know that there should be a draft action plan that's proposed to be issued by the end of June of this year for it to be considered that is co-developed with Indigenous leadership. And I just want to make sure that the work that we do here is complementary to that work so that we are not getting ahead of that work or that it's perceived that the people in this room are trying to impose a pathway that isn't agreed upon. That is my only concern, and I feel that should just be put out there as we weigh in on how we do this right. There is a sense of urgency, and I appreciate that, but I do want to make sure we get this right and that it can be implemented. Currently, the agreements are jurisdictional. If there's no framework to implement them to protect FPIC by provinces that are in that agreement, because there isn't a framework currently, then I would hate to be accused that everyone in this room is a part of putting something in that is hollow when Indigenous children deserve more than that. They deserve better. Thank you, Chair.
Madame Gazan?
Quite frankly, Mr. Chair, I mean, there is a framework that was certainly been working on First Nations leadership, was quite clear about it actually at the AFN and said it's like totally unacceptable and subpar. I would challenge any sort of insinuation that First Nations leadership will have difficulty with having free, prior, and informed consent over matters impacting our children. Bizarre. I certainly wouldn't meet any parent if you take the Indigenous out of it and you just put a human being making decisions about their children. I don't think any parent in this country would fight against the self-determination to make decisions about their children. And I think that First Nations leadership will be shocked and disturbed that in 2023, that the free, prior, and informed consent over matters impacting Indigenous children isn't just a said conclusion in this country, and that we're still playing political games in 2023 about the human rights of First Nations children in this country, Indigenous kids, over self-determining the path for our children. So I think that argument is fairly weak. Certainly, I don't accept that argument. It's not a logical argument, and I'll just leave it at there. And I do feel that we're at a stage in this country where people really do want to move forward in reconciliation. I believe that. But if we can't start with children, with the kind of history in this country, with residential schools and ongoing issues with child welfare and issues around Canadian Human Rights Tribunal rulings and all of those things, birth alerts and forced sterilization, this is very disturbing to me, in fact, that we have to debate this. But I do accept that this is a democracy, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
No further discussion. I will call for a recorded vote on the amendment of Madame Gazan.
Ms. Sachs?
No.
Mr. Collins? Mr. Coteau?
In favor.
Mr. Van Bynen? Sorry, was that no? Mr. Long?
No.
Ms. Gray?
Yes?
Ms. Falk?
Yes.
Ms. Ferrari?
Yes.
Monsieur Godin?
Oui.
Madame Bérubé? Ms. Gazan?
Yes.
Yes pour 7, nays contre 4.
The amendment is adopted.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
The amendment is adopted. Yeah. We'll now move to Clause 6. Call the vote on Clause 6 as amended. Recorded vote.
Ms. Sachs?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Coteau?
I'm sorry, what are we voting on? I lost track there. Sorry, Mr. Chair.
The clause that was just amended.
Oh, in favor.
Mr. Van Bynen?
Yes.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Ms. Gray?
Yes?
Ms. Falk? Ms. Ferrari?
Yes.
Monsieur Godin?
Oui.
Madame Bérubé? And Ms. Gazan?
Yes.
Yes pour 11.
Clause 6 carried as amended.
Yeah.
We'll now move to Clause 7. I understand. Madame Ferrari?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are putting forth an amendment for Clause 7, and I think this is the most important clause that we can, amendment rather, that we can put forward in this bill. And I think we've just heard a powerful exchange about parents having choice in caring for their children, and flexible options and ensuring that everybody has access to quality, affordable childcare. And we heard multiple testimony from many witnesses about wait lists and parents who are left out in the cold, and that there's still a lot of winners and losers in this bill. So I would propose the following amendment. In Clause 7, be amended by replacing lines 4 to 9 on page 5 with the following. Facilitate access to all types of early learning and childcare programs and services regardless of the provider, such as those that are provided through traditional daycare centers, centers with extended, part-time or overnight care, nurseries, flexible and drop-in care, before and after school care, preschools and co-op childcare, faith-based care, unique programming to support children with disabilities, home-based childcare, nannies and shared nannies, au pairs, stay-at-home parents or guardians who raise their own children, or family members, friends or neighbors who provide care that meet or exceed standards set by provincial governments or Indigenous governing bodies and respond to the varying needs of children and families while respecting the jurisdiction and unique needs of the provinces and Indigenous peoples.
Thank you, Madame Ferrari. Before we open the floor to discussion, I want to make clear to the committee, if CPC 1 is adopted, NDP 2 cannot be moved due to a line conflict. Both amendments seek to modify lines 4 and 8 on page 5. As House of Commons procedure and practice, third edition states on page 769, once a line of a clause has been amended by the committee, it cannot be further amended by a subsequent amendment, as a given line may be amended only once. So now I will open the floor to discussion on the amendment of Madame Ferrari as it references to lines 4 and 8. Madame Sachs?
Thank you, Chair. And I will just simply say that this clause was drafted to closely align with the current CWELC system that prioritizes not-for-profit public childcare, and that's simply because as stewards of the public purse, we want to make sure that we are creating a system that is both high quality, affordable, accessible, licensed, and within the purview of standards that are set. Every province and territory that signed on to CWELC understood the parameters of non-for-profit and public priorities and signed and is moving forward. There were some private childcare agreement, some private childcare that was grandfathered in. Ontario is a perfect example of that. But province by province, the agreements outlined who was coming into the system, who was signing on, how it would be managed, and the priorities that they set. So I would say that when we look at the evidence, and there was much evidence discussed here at this committee by many, many witnesses about the quality of care that is provided in the nonprofit and public sector model. That is the model that we are proud of. We have Quebec to look to of the success of that, and also the hiccups that come along the way. We know that this is not an easy lift creating a nationwide system, but nevertheless it is a nationwide system that prioritizes for-profit care because the care of the children is the priority. And the evidence shows strongly for that. We've seen models such as Australia, where there was creep into the private sector that left a system that collapsed, parents without care, and the quality plummeted. And we don't want that for our children. We don't want that for our families across this country. And stewarding the public purse means that we prioritize the best quality care that evidence has shown us. Thank you.
Ms. Sachs, Madame Ferrari.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. there's nothing universal about this child care bill, and I think that is what we heard repeatedly from witnesses and testimony. And you know, if I can go to a couple of quotes from witnesses that were submitted to committee. This is from Catherine Babawal. She's from Les Petits Soleils, Inc. She said, CWELC rollout has actually resulted in inequitable access and creation of extensive waitlists for parents. Expansion freezes have been placed upon private operators, which have created a lack of access for families in private centres and waitlists in the hundreds per centre. These expansion freezes are creating a two-tiered system. Increased demand for childcare due to CWELC has forced private programs to expand to meet need despite having no access to grants for parents, which results in parents paying upwards of $50 more per day for the same program, staff, and venue. And I guess I think it's just frustrating. Just own what it is, if I was going to be so blunt, because we just went through and heard this from my colleague down the way, Ms. Gazan. Just own it. Either you're including everyone or you're not. And I think it's unfortunate that, you know, you've pitted two systems against each other that need each other to meet the demand. And at the core of this discussion has to be the child. The nucleus of this discussion is the welfare of the child. And, you know, there's countless testimony that just says there are winners and losers. And I've said this repeatedly, I'm a mom. Affordable childcare, quality childcare is incredible, but if it's not accessible, it doesn't exist. And the only people who are winning, and we heard this repeatedly, are the people who already have a spot. So either call it what it is or don't. It's not universal childcare, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Madame Ferrari. Ms. Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So adding this amendment is really important because, you know, we want to make sure that there is access for all parents and for all children. And, I mean, really parents are the best ones to decide who cares for their children. And I think part of what's in this amendment does lay out where it says, and I'll just quote it here, that meet or exceed standards set by provincial governments or Indigenous governing bodies. So this is really important that this is in here because this is saying that this would be childcare that are meeting these standards. And so therefore, if the provincial standards are acceptable, then it should be acceptable for that child to be in whatever format that might look like. And right now, this bill, the way that it is, and I mean, really it's coming after the agreements have been made with the provinces, but you know, it touts on being accessible and inclusive, and in fact, it's leaving out a whole number of children that really need access to this. I did, during the time when we were having witnesses and doing questioning, I did quote a couple of childcare providers from my riding, but there are many, many others, and I've had many parents reach out to me as they've seen this program roll out, how it's leaving people behind, and I have visited childcare facilities in my riding as well. So I think that this is one of the most important pieces that we can add to this legislation so that there is access for everyone, so that everyone is covered. And really the government is prioritizing government and not-for-profit facilities. However, they are not going to be the organizations solely in order to expand the number of childcare spaces that are needed. I mean, we have numbers that are in, you know, the tens of thousands of children that need placement, and actually we need over 40,000 workers as well. So there's a lot of private facilities that have opened. You know, we heard testimony. They've taken on personal debt. You know, they do this for the love of what they do. It's their passion. And a lot of them aren't, they're not similar to a lot of the organizations that other members might quote where they're huge corporate national organizations. A lot of these organizations are private, but they're in our communities. You know, they're serving maybe 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 children. They're not of a huge size, but they're serving our communities all over this country, and it's really important that we capture all of them, because right now there's children being left behind. So I think this is one of the most important pieces that we can add to this legislation and make it stronger and make it better, and there's overwhelming support in order to have more accessibility for families that really need access to this program. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Gray. Ms. Ferrari?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to put into the record, because these were submitted testimony to the committee, and I think it's really important to have them on record, because I think these voices are really important. And do we know the number, if I can ask, of how many submissions we had from this bill?
It was 58 or perhaps a few more that were received lately.
And what would be the normal submission for a committee, do you know? Or average?
Not sure that it would depend.
But you can see this impacts a lot of people, and so I just want to read a couple of things that I think are really important to have into the record. So, to meet the current and expanding demand, Canadian families need all forms of childcare to be affordable and accessible. Limiting parental choice to one kind of care conflicts with the notion of a universal plan and hinders access. To improve access, the plan must acknowledge home childcare, both licensed and unlicensed, as a valuable component of the childcare system. Not only does home childcare impact expansion, as it is faster and less costly to open, but home childcare also meets the unique needs of Canadian families by allowing them to choose a caregiver with similar values, a shared language, or a shared culture. In partnership with their caregiver, a strong bond is established, resulting in a mutually cohesive relationship focused on the needs of the child.
State your point of order.
I just think that when we're talking about unlicensed or care that is not within the scope of the agreements of which this legislation speaks to, that it's out of scope for the discussion as we move through amendments on the legislation.
Ms. Ferrari, if you could keep your comments to the amendment that you moved.
So just to follow up on the rest of that quote, we know that family engagement is essential to each child's development. So that is from Julie Bisnath. She's the program coordinator, Child Care Providers Resource Network. And one more here that I think is really important to read into the record. ELCC programs, Early Learning Childcare is what that stands for, programs to be inclusive of and responsive to the rights and needs of children with disabilities and their parents/caregivers. Implementing such a mandate can address exclusive and harmful practices and advance a fundamental shift in how children with disabilities are viewed in our society and how early learning childcare providers are trained and supported. We also recommended that active measures be taken to alleviate the burden on parents to advocate for their individual child's inclusion and navigate a complex bureaucratic system. So that was from Dr. Alison Gerlach and Dr. Janet Newbury, School of Child and Youth Care, University of Victoria. So I just, again, want some of these on record for people at home to know that, you know, there's been this attempt by the Liberals to paint the Conservatives as anti-childcare people, and nothing could be further from the truth. What we're trying to do is ensure that everyone is included. And I know I've had very passionate discussions, and I hope you know where we come from, that it is my job as the critic to stand up for all of the people that are left out. And there are, you know, you've met with them. So how can we say this is a universal childcare bill if we don't include them? You know, what are we saying to Canadian families who are left out in the cold? Women who can't go to work and small entrepreneur women who are going to have to shut their doors. This is actually hurting so many women because they can't choose that. So all we're asking today is for you to consider this amendment seriously, because I think there's an opportunity to strengthen this bill in a way that says, yes, we here at the House of Commons, yes, we as elected officials care for everyone. And yes, we will be flexible and say, yes, we trust parents to choose what's best for their children. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I too want to speak to this amendment in support of this. I think looking at the amendment and the fact of it saying regardless of the provider, I know I've met with many new Canadians that have come to Canada that heavily rely on their ethnic community. Whether that's grandparents, friends, or family from where they're from. Also, too, in a rural aspect as well, I think it's important to note that not every community, especially in rural Canada, has access to daycare or a facility that is a daycare facility. And there's a lot of families in, I know, my communities that are using home-based childcare, nannies, shared nannies, au pairs. I know a lot too. I've got communities in my ridings that have au pairs from Europe that have come. But on the end half of this, I mean, it states right here that meet or exceed the standards set by provincial governments or Indigenous governing bodies. So I think again, and we heard just as. Ms. Ferreira said as well, we heard a very compelling argument earlier from MP Gazan when it comes to Indigenous women and children. And she said herself that it's meet any parent, right, that wants to be able to, in her terms of free prior and informed consent, but being able to have that opinion and be included. I just really hope that the other parties, the members of the other parties here, really seriously consider this, and the fact that there's lack of spaces in the country as it is, and the fact that there are rural parts of this country that don't have access to an urban center that may offer a program that is approved by this federal government under this layout. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gray. Sorry, Ms. Falk. Sorry. Seeing no further discussion, then I will ask the clerk to call a recorded vote on the amendment of Madame Ferrari. Everybody's clear. We're voting on CPC 1 amendment of Madame Ferrari. Clerk?
Ms. Sachs?
Can't.
Mr. Collins? Mr. Coteau? Mr. Van Bynen? Mr. Long?
No.
Ms. Gray?
Yes?
Ms. Falk? Ms. Ferrari?
Yes.
Monsieur Godin?
Oui.
Madame Bérubé?
Pour.
Ms. Gazan?
No.
Yes pour 5, 5, nays contre 6, 6.
The amendment of Madame Ferrari has been defeated, so that allows NDP 2 to be moved. Madame Gazan, are you moving?
Yes, that Bill C-35 in Clause 7 be amended by replacing line 4 and 5 with the following. A, increase the provision of and facilitate equitable access to high-quality early learning and childcare. B, by replacing line 8 on page 5 with the following. Governments or Indigenous governing bodies that are reflective of other evidence-based best practices and high-quality service provision, and then it goes on. C, by replacing line 10 on page 5 with the following. B, enable families of all income levels, including low-income families, to benefit from. D, by replacing lines 13 and 14 on page 5 with the following. C, support the provision, including in rural and remote communities, of early learning and childcare programs and services that are inclusive of children from systemically marginalized groups, including children with disabilities and children from English and French linguistic minority communities. That E, by replacing in the English version line 16 on page 5 with the following. allies that respond to their various needs, and F, by replacing lines 21 and 22 on page 5 with the following: qualified and early childhood education workforce that is well supported by good working conditions, livable wages and benefits, opportunities to obtain experience and ongoing training, and other measures necessary for their recruitment and retention of staff.
I open the floor for debate. If NDP 2, the amendment moved by Madame Gazan, is adopted, then CPC 2 cannot be moved to a line conflict. Both amendments seek to modify line 10 and 5. So, discussion on the motion, the amendment of Madame Gazan. Madame Sachs.
I'd like to thank my colleague from the NDP for putting forward to enhance the scope, enhance the work that we're doing here today. It's important. She's made some very important interventions thus far. Chair, with regards to paragraph A, and I'm wondering if this is a friendly sub-amendment to my colleague to just simply change increase with the word support.
So we have a sub-amendment moved by Ms. Sachs. So word change. The committee members clear the word change, the amendment, the sub-amendment of Ms. Sachs? It requires a sub-amendment, right, to change the word, yes. Okay, do we have that? We have it. We'll suspend for a moment while we get the clarifications submitted to the members. Suspend for 2 minutes. clerk has advised me that committee members should have the word change. The word change that was moved by Madame Sachs as a sub-amendment to the amendment that was being debated of Madame Gazan. Does everybody have the word change? Do you want to reference it again, Ms. Sachs? The word.
Changing the word from increase in paragraph A to support.
Okay. So the sub-amendment of Ms. Sachs is to change the word of the amendment in section, and give it again, Ms. Sachs.
Change the word from increase to support.
Okay. I'm going to call, seeing no further debate, I'm going to call a vote on the sub-amendment of Ms. Sachs, which you all have. Is to change, clerk, to change the word from,
So, Ms. Sachs,
Oui.
Mr. Collins. Yes. Mr. Coteau? Yes. Mr. Van Bynen? Yes. Mr. Long?
Yes.
Ms. Gray?
No.
Ms. Falk? No. Ms. Ferrari? No. Monsieur Godin?
Non.
Madame Bérubé?
Oui.
Ms. Gazan?
Yes.
Yeas pour 7, nays contre 4.
sub-amendment of Ms. Sachs has been carried. We will now revert to the amendment of Ms. Gazan as amended. Ms. Sachs?
Thank you, Chair, for recognizing me. I would like to put forward another sub-amendment in paragraph F, if I may, by replacing lines 20 to 22 on page 5 with the following: development of young children, including through the recruitment and retention of a qualified and well-supported early childhood education workforce, recognizing that working conditions affect the provision of those programs and services. And I believe that has been submitted to the clerk and can be circulated to the members. If there's a need to suspend to review, it's quite all right. Will not suspend.
Si c'est possible, pour le greffier de m'ajouter.
Is it possible for the clerk to add my email, because I'm not receiving the sub-amendments?
Merci, Monsieur Godin. We're still, are we on the amendment of Ms. Gazan?
Yes, so it's a second supplement.
Of the committee, we have the second sub-amendment of Ms. Sachs of the amendment of Madame Gazan. Any discussion? No, that's fine. They're still receiving. Discussion on the second sub-amendment of Ms. Sachs. Ms. Falk?
I just have a question. Can you repeat what you want it changed to? Just, I feel like I've got half a word, and I don't.
It's development, because if you look at the paragraph as written in the actual bill, it jumps to the next line. It's lines 20 to 22.
Thank you. That makes more sense.
Monsieur Godin, c'est nécessaire en français?
Yeah.
Oui? Okay.
You had your hand?
I appreciate the sub-amendment. I just think it's unfortunate that it's not as clear, but I just want to have that on record in terms of protection for workers.
Any further discussion on the sub-amendment of Madame Sachs? Ms. Gray?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now that we all have it, can we just have a moment for discussion now that we've all, if it's finally come in, we've all seen it now? Yeah, just for a moment or two.
Good. We'll spend for 2 moments while members are considering the sub-amendment. Spend for 2 minutes. We're dealing with, currently on the floor, is the second sub-amendment of Ms. Sachs. You all have it. Any further discussion on the sub-amendment of Ms. Sachs? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, I ask you to call a recorded vote on the sub-amendment of Ms. Sachs on the amendment of Ms. Gazan?
Ms. Sachs
Oui.
and Mr. Collins. Yes. Mr. Coteau. Yes. Mr. Van Bynen. Yes. Mr. Long.
Yes.
Ms. Gray.
No.
Ms. Falk. No. Ms. Ferrari. No. Monsieur Godin.
Non.
Madame Bérubé. No. Ms. Gazan.
Yes.
Yeas pour 6, nays contre 5.
The sub-amendment of Madame Sachs is carried. We'll now move to the amendment of Ms. Gazan as amended. Ms. Ferrari.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think I just want to put on the record where thoughts are from this side in terms of this amendment. And I think, you know, while the NDP has removed the previous proposed language of licensed childcare, which we support because we've been pretty adamant in including everyone and being universal, from the legislation, it's still calling out public and not-for-profit, which goes against parents' rights to choose the childcare that is right for them, which again goes against the main tenets of this legislation of quality, availability, affordability, accessibility, and inclusiveness in childcare. Thank you.
Madame Ferrari, seeing no further discussion, I'll call for a recorded vote on the amendment of Madame Gazan as amended.
Madame Sachs.
Oui.
Mr. Collins. Yes. Sir Coteau. Yes. Mr. Van Bynen.
Yes.
Mr. Long.
Yes.
Ms. Gray.
No.
Ms. Falk. No. Ms. Ferrari.
No.
Monsieur Godin.
No.
Madame Bérubé.
No.
Ms. Gazan.
Yes.
Yeas pour 6, nays contre 5.
NDP amendment as amended is carried. That means CPC 2 cannot be moved. Well, now, is there an amendment? Madame Bérubé, do you have an amendment to move on this section? Madame Bérubé? We're still on clause 7. Madame Bérubé?
Oui, Monsieur le Président.
BQ1, proposed by Bloc Québécois, C35, Clause 7, being modified by adjunction after line 35, page 5, as follows. Having regard to the special and unique nature of the jurisdiction of the Government of Quebec relating to early learning and childcare in Quebec society, and despite any other provision of this Act, the Government of Quebec may choose to exempt itself from the application of this Act by giving the Minister written notice to that effect, in which case that province may still receive the funding under Section 8. Let me explain myself. This amendment wishes to integrate a recognition of expertise in Quebec in the study of bills. This amendment acknowledges the competence of Quebec and acknowledges that it can exempt itself from the application of this law while receiving assistance. That is to avoid quarrels between Quebec and Ottawa, because we know that Quebec is actually ahead in child care policies. Quebec also has an avant-garde family policy for 25 years now, and this policy that can be qualified as a progressive one and a feminist one has ensured that many women and families were able to balance their work life and family life. With the creation of child care centers. This is a pride of the entire nation of Quebec, and that is the inspiration for this bill, actually. This amendment will confirm the special and unique nature of the competence of the Government of Quebec in terms of the education and development of children, giving it its right to exempt itself with full compensation. And it also has to do with the exclusive scope of competence of provinces, and we believe that this amendment and all the amendments amendments that we are proposing will avoid quarrels between Ottawa and Quebec in future federal investments on this subject. This is why I am inviting all of my colleagues to vote in favor of this amendment and recognizing all of the work that Quebec has done for 25 years now.
Roubaix, the role of the chair of the committee is to rule on admissibility of amendments as dictated by procedure of the House of Commons. My ruling, therefore, on this amendment is Bill C-35 sets out the Government of Canada's vision for a Canada-wide early learning childcare system. The amendment proposes to allow the Government of Quebec to exempt itself from the application of the bill while receiving federal funding for its early learning and childcare programs and services. As a House of Commons procedure and practice, third edition states on page 772, since an amendment may not infringe upon the financial initiative of the Crown, it is inadmissible if it imposes a change on the public treasury, or if it extends the objects or purposes or relaxes the conditions and qualifications specified in the royal recommendation. In the opinion of the chair, the amendment proposes to alter the terms and conditions for spending provided in the royal recommendation. In addition, the amendment is contrary to the bill's stated principle of creating a Canada-wide system, since there is no mechanism to allow any province or territory to opt out of that system while still receiving federal funding. Therefore, I rule the amendment is admissible. The amendment is inadmissible. The ruling of the chair cannot be questioned.
Monsieur le Président, je...
Mr. Chairman, I want to contest, and I want a nominal vote.
It can be questioned, but it cannot be debated. So, are you challenging my ruling, Madame Beyroube?
Excusez, la traduction, c'est pas fait. Oui.
Yes.
Therefore, Madame Beyroube has challenged my decision. Mr. Clerk, I call a recorded vote on the decision of the chair. Do you support the decision of the chair or oppose it?
Ms. Sachs.
Oui.
Mr. Collins.
Yes.
Mr. Coteau. Mr. Van Bynen?
Yes.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Ms. Gray?
Yes.
Ms. Falk? Yes. Ms. Ferrari?
Yes.
Mr. Godin?
Oui.
Madame Bérubé?
So these are still on the side. So it's...
And Ms. Gazan?
No.
Yes pour 9, 9, nays contre 2, 2.
The amendment of Madame Beyroube cannot be entertained by the committee. We'll now move to CPC 2.1.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je vais faire la lecture. Merci de me donner.
Thank you, Chair. I will try to read very quickly that Bill C-35 in Clause 7 be amended by adding, after line 29 on page 5, the following. 3. Federal investment in respect of early learning and childcare programs and services subject to an agreement entered into with a province must be guided by the commitments set out in the Official Languages Act, in addition to the principles set out. Article 7 outlines the guidelines for assistance given to childcare programs. It is critical because it will ensure that the federal government will take into account its commitments with respect to official languages as outlined in the Official Languages Act when it's going to provide funding for childcare services and programs. The Official Languages Act proposes that we would have assistance from the federal government when given opportunities for early learning and childcare. To make you better understand, let me give examples. In New Brunswick, the government recently announced the creation of 1,900 places in child care centers, and 300 of them will be French-speaking. That is about 16% for French-speaking New Brunswick citizens. Meanwhile, there are 30% of them in that province. In Nova Scotia, the provincial government decided to reduce its project to merge with its funding with the federal government. It has decided to merge all of them in one provincial agency that already exists, and the management in that agency is fully English speaking, and that would be an infringement of the application of the Canadian Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms in Ontario. Francophone childcare services in Ontario would not have access to funding from the provinces, which wants to increase salaries from childcare services. It's mostly private English-speaking childcare services that are going to receive that assistance from the province. And to conclude, Mr. Chairman, I want to mention here Alberta. On the 1,500 places that have been announced, only 19 placements are given to French-speaking Albertans, and that represents 0.013% of placements for Albertan Francophones, and they represent over 2% of the population in Alberta. Let me conclude with British Columbia and Manitoba. Manitoba has a good history. I have to say that the provincial government has the will to ensure that Manitoba has a positive impact, financially speaking. So, dear members, I want you to consider these elements, because we have an opportunity with this bill to give the federal government tools to have concrete positive results with respect to education in French-speaking childcare in those areas where they are in minority across the country. And I think it's important. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this committee meeting, what is important is to really have this presence, this effective in every bill that will be tabled from the time that the Official Languages Act was amended, and that will surely be adopted in plenary very soon. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, just to be clear, it's my intentions to conclude at 5:40. We started about 10 minutes late, if that's agreeable. So then we will open the floor to discussion on the amendment of Monsieur Gaudin. Madame Sachs.
Thank you, Chair. Merci à mon collègue, Monsieur.
Thank you to my colleague, Member Gaudin, for this proposed amendment.
If we could get some, perhaps, weighing in on officials on the amendment proposed by my colleague.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. From a policy perspective, the amendment that has been suggested is consistent with what we know of the Official Languages Act at this time. There's nothing additional to comment beyond that.
No further discussion. Monsieur Gaudin.
Enfin, Monsieur le Président.
Well, Mr. Chair, there is a typing error that slid into the proposed amendment. We should have read that Bill C-35 in Clause 7 be amended after line 35. So I would request unanimous consent to correct the heading of my motion, please.
The legislative clerk said we can make that. In English, it's correct. En français, it refers to avant. And we'll change to après. Oui. So with that minor change in the French version, seeing no... Madam Clerk, speak to it.
Just for clarification, so the issue, so the English is correct. The issue is one that with the instructions on the French side. It says, it reads before line 35, or it should read after line 35. So there's no really consent needed. The text of the amendment doesn't change, so the consent of the committee is not really needed for that, but it was just for clarification. So the English is correct.
Okay. Seeing no, I will ask the clerk to do a recorded vote on the amendment of Mr. Godin.
Madame Sachs?
Oui.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Coteau?
Yes.
Mr. Van Bynen?
Yes.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Ms. Gray?
Yes.
Ms. Falk?
Yes.
Ms. Ferreri?
Yes.
Monsieur Godin?
Sûr, oui.
Madame Bérubé?
Oh.
And Ms. Gazan?
Yes.
Yes pour 11.
CPC 2-1 is carried. Shall clause 7 carry as amended? Record a vote.
And Ms. Sachs?
Oui.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Coteau?
Yes.
Mr. Van Bynen?
Yes.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Ms. Gray?
Yes.
Ms. Falk?
Yes.
Ms. Ferreri?
Yes.
Monsieur Godin?
Oui.
Madame Bérubé?
Oui.
Ms. Gazan?
Yes.
Yes pour 11.
Clause 7 is carried with amendment. We'll conclude one more, Clause 8, because there was 2 amendments and they were withdrawn. Shall Clause 8 carry? See consensus, Clause 8 is carried. With that, committee members, I will adjourn the meeting until Friday when we'll resume clause-by-clause discussion of review of Bill C-35. Thank you for your participation this afternoon. And to the department staff, thank you for coming and answering those questions that were directed to you by committee members. Thank you all. Meeting adjourned.